The trauma bay lights were so bright they turned everything white, white coats, white ceiling, white noise from machines beeping on both sides. I could taste blood where it had slipped down from my temple. A nurse pressed gauze to my forehead and asked me questions in a calm voice, but her words kept sliding before I could grab them. My fingers moved through the air until they found a sleeve. My sister. Brittany was standing right beside my gurney, arms crossed tight, mascara smudged like she'd been rubbing her eyes hard. Not from crying. From being irritated. "Brittany," I whispered. "Please don't leave." Her jaw tightened. She leaned in close, not like comfort, like a warning. "I can't do this," she hissed. "Don't make me the bad guy." The nurse looked up. "Ma'am, we just need a signature for consent." Brittany stepped back like the clipboard was on fire. "I'm not signing anything," she said. "I'm not responsible for her." Then she walked. Not toward the waiting room. Not toward the exit to make a call. Straight through the sliding doors and out into the dark. Gone. The nurse's voice softened. "Sweetheart, are you alone?" "My name is Lauren Whitmore." And that was the moment I understood my sister didn't just leave. She chose to. In our family, Brittany was the storm everyone learned to live around. My parents called her sensitive. What they meant was unpredictable. When Brittany was happy, the house had air in it. When she was upset, every room felt smaller. I was the quieter one. The steady one. The one who figured out early that asking for too much love made people tired, so I stopped asking. I became the support beam nobody thought to check on. I covered for Brittany when she forgot things. I smoothed things over when she said something that stung. I made myself smaller so she could take up more space, and I told myself that was love, because nobody taught me the difference. I grew up reliable and invisible, which are two things that look similar from the outside but feel nothing alike from within. And when I was lying in a hospital bed for the very first time, genuinely terrified and in pain and more alone than I had ever been, I finally learned something I should have understood years earlier. Being the strong one does not protect you. It just means the people who should hold you up have never had to practice. I was the support beam. And no one ever checked whether the beam was cracking. I remembered headlights. A horn blaring somewhere ahead. My hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. And Brittany's voice, sharp and impatient, cutting through the quiet of the car. "Just turn here," she'd snapped. "I can't," I had said. "It's a one-way, Lauren, just do it." Then light. Then sound. Then nothing. The next clear thing I knew was the ceiling of the trauma bay and the nurse asking if I was alone. When the doctor told me Brittany had left the hospital, my brain rejected it the way a body rejects something poisonous, a full refusal, instant and physical. She wouldn't do that. Even Brittany, with all her selfishness and all her bad timing, would not walk out of a hospital and leave me bleeding and alone on a gurney. Except she had. The proof was in the empty space beside me. No bag on the chair. No coat draped over the rail. No sign that anyone had ever stayed. Just the faint smell of her perfume still hanging near the pillow, which was somehow worse than if she had never been there at all. Because it meant she had been close enough to stay, and chosen not to. Without a family member to sign the paperwork, things slowed down the way only hospitals can slow down, quietly, without drama, but with a weight that pressed on everything. I heard a doctor say from the hallway, "We need consent for the MRI before we can proceed." I watched a case manager flip through my file, frowning at something she didn't share with me. "I can't reach anyone listed here," she muttered, more to herself than to me. My purse was missing. My phone was gone. Even my shoes had disappeared somewhere between the crash site and the gurney. I had nothing. No way to call anyone, no way to confirm anything, no way to tell my parents where I was or that something had happened. I lay in that bed in a gown that was too thin for the cold of the room, and I stared at the ceiling and tried very hard not to cry. Because crying meant falling apart, and I couldn't afford to fall apart when there was nobody there to help me put myself back together. I had always been the one who held things steady. I had just never understood, until that moment, what it cost to be that person in a world that assumed you would always be fine. A charge nurse named Carol started stopping at my door between patients. She didn't ask permission to care about me. She just did it, the way some people do when they are genuinely good at their work and also genuinely good as people. She adjusted my blanket without being asked. She refilled my water cup without making it feel like a task. On her second visit, she pulled a chair close and sat down, not hovering but present. "Do you have someone I can try to contact?" she asked, her voice careful and kind. I swallowed around the tightness in my throat. "My sister was here," I said. "She left." Carol's expression changed. It didn't become pity, which I was grateful for. It became something more useful, focused and practical, like a person mentally rearranging priorities. "Okay," she said. "Then we do this a different way." She helped me work through the hospital's process for reaching family. She walked me through what paperwork could wait and what absolutely couldn't. She treated me like someone worth the extra steps. And for the first time since I had opened my eyes in that bright, cold room, I felt something that wasn't fear or pain or confusion. I felt like someone was actually on my side. On the second day, a hospital security officer came into my room carrying a small clear plastic bag. Inside it was a phone. My phone. I recognized the case immediately, a blue one with a small silver sticker of a star in the bottom corner that I had put there 2 years ago. The screen was shattered, cracked from corner to corner, but it was mine. "Found this near the east exit," the officer said. "Parking lot, close to the curb." Near the east exit. The same exit Brittany had walked through when she left. I thanked him and held the phone in both hands. When I pressed the button, the lock screen came up, but it wasn't my usual 4-digit code. The passcode had been changed. I tried my old one 3 times. Nothing. I sat very still with the phone in my lap and let that information settle. Brittany hadn't just walked away while I was lying on a gurney. She had taken my phone with her. And she had changed the passcode before leaving it in the parking lot. It wasn't careless. It wasn't panic. It was deliberate. She had made sure, in those first terrifying hours, that I had no way to call for help from anyone who knew me. Carol helped me use the hospital phone to call my parents on the second evening. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice casual and slightly distracted, not the voice of a woman whose daughter had been in a car accident. "Oh," she said, and I heard real relief in it, the kind that comes from a worry already resolved. "You're awake." "Good." Brittany told us you were staying with her to rest. The floor dropped out from under me even though I was flat on my back. "No," I said slowly. "Mom. I'm in the hospital. I've been here since Tuesday night. Alone." Silence. Then my father's voice from somewhere behind her, muffled but clear enough. "What does she mean alone?" Brittany said she handled everything. My mother's breathing changed. It went shallow and quick. She said you were fine," my mother whispered. She wouldn't lie about something like that. But her voice cracked on the last word. Not because she was sure. Because she was terrified she was wrong. And I realized, lying there with the phone pressed against my ear and a bruise spreading across my left cheekbone, that Brittany hadn't just disappeared. She had managed the story while I was unconscious and unable to correct it. My parents arrived the following morning, faces pale and tight with guilt already hardening into defensiveness at the edges. My mother grabbed my hand the second she reached the bed, trembling. "Oh sweetheart, I didn't know, I thought," my father cut in, voice aimed at the situation rather than at the person who caused it. "Your sister told us you didn't want visitors," he said. "That you needed quiet." I looked at both of them. "You believed her," I said. My mother's eyes filled. My father's jaw locked. I watched them have a silent argument, the kind long marriages conduct in glances. about who was allowed to feel bad right now. My mother said, "We were trying to respect what we thought you wanted." I said, "I wanted someone to answer when the hospital tried to call." Neither of them had a response. They sat beside my bed for an hour, my mother holding my hand too tightly and my father staring out the window. And I understood something I had never let myself say clearly. Brittany hadn't just left me alone in the hospital. She had called our parents first and built a careful wall between me and anyone I might have reached, before I was even conscious enough to know it was happening. A social worker came to discuss my discharge plan on the third morning. She was efficient and organized, the kind of person who made difficult conversations feel manageable by keeping them factual. She was going through her checklist when she paused, glanced at something in my file, and said carefully, "The police report from your accident noted some unusual behavior from the other occupant of the vehicle." I went still. "What kind of unusual behavior?" She looked up. "Your sister left the scene before completing her statement to the officers." I stared at her. "She left the crash site?" The social worker nodded. "The report indicates she was present initially, but when officers returned to take her statement fully, she was gone." The room felt very quiet suddenly. I had been building a picture in my mind of what Brittany had done, the abandonment, the phone, the lie to my parents, and I had been telling myself it was fear. Panic. A person overwhelmed and making terrible decisions. But leaving the crash scene before giving a full police statement was not panic. That was a person actively avoiding something specific. And I didn't know yet what she was trying to avoid. But I was beginning to understand that she had very good reasons to disappear. Carol found me staring at the ceiling that afternoon, quiet in a way that wasn't restful. She came in, checked the monitors, and then instead of leaving she pulled the chair close again. She had a way of sitting that made the room feel less clinical. "Lauren," she said, after a moment. "Is it possible your sister is afraid of being blamed for something?" I didn't answer right away. I turned the question over slowly in my mind, the way you turn something fragile. I thought about Brittany's voice in the car, sharp, impatient, insisting I take a turn I told her wasn't right. I thought about the phone with the changed passcode. I thought about the lie to my parents, so smooth and quick it must have been ready before she even made the call. Carol didn't push me. She just waited. "I don't want to believe that," I finally said. Carol nodded slowly. "I know," she said. "But sometimes the reason a person runs isn't cruelty." She paused. "Sometimes it's guilt." I let that sit between us for a long moment. Because guilt and cruelty are different things. But when you are the one left alone and bleeding, they feel almost exactly the same. On the third night, the pain medication shifted to a lower dose and my brain began to clear. And when it cleared, it did what brains do after trauma, it replayed. I was back in the car. It was raining lightly. Brittany was scrolling her phone in the passenger seat, restless and irritated about something she hadn't explained. We had been arguing about her engagement party, about the plans she kept changing, about how I had rearranged my whole week to drive her to a venue appointment. "You always do this," she'd said. "You act like helping me is some huge sacrifice." I hadn't answered. I had kept my eyes on the road. Then she grabbed my arm. Not gently. Hard enough to pull my attention sideways. "Turn here," she snapped. "I just told you, it's not, Lauren. Turn here right now." I looked. Just for a second. 1 second of my eyes leaving the road ahead. And then the headlights. I lay in my hospital bed in the dark and let that memory sit fully in my chest for the first time. Brittany had grabbed my arm. She had pulled my attention from the road. She wasn't just a passenger in the accident. She was the reason my eyes weren't where they needed to be. My mother tried calling Brittany from my bedside on the fourth morning, sitting beside me with her phone on speaker so I could hear. It rang twice and went to voicemail. But the voicemail message was different from Brittany's usual one. Instead of her normal cheerful greeting, it was short and clipped. Leave a message, she said, her voice low and tight, like someone speaking quietly in a room where they didn't want to be overheard. My father, standing by the window, turned around slowly. That's not her normal message, he said. My mother pressed her lips together. She changed it, she said quietly. My father's expression darkened, the way it does when a person realizes something they should have seen sooner and is angry at themselves for missing it. She's hiding, he said. Not a question. A conclusion. My mother didn't argue with it. She held my hand a little tighter instead, and I watched something shift in her face, the particular expression of a parent finally stopping pretending that the child they love most is also the child who deserves the most protection. It was a small shift. But it was real. And I had been waiting for it for longer than I could name. A younger nurse came in on the 4th afternoon to take my vitals. She was scanning my chart when she paused and glanced up. Your last name is Whitmore? She asked. Yes, I said. She looked back at the chart, then back at me, something careful moving through her expression. I was on shift the night you came in, she said. Tuesday. My throat tightened. I remember your sister, she continued. She was in the waiting area for about 20 minutes while they stabilized you. I watched her face. What do you remember about her? I asked slowly. The nurse hesitated. Then she said, her voice dropping just slightly, she kept asking the desk staff whether the police had spoken to anyone yet. Whether anyone had given them a detailed account of how the accident happened. She looked at me steadily. She asked 3 times in 20 minutes. I held very still. Brittany hadn't been in the waiting room worrying about whether I was alive. She had been in the waiting room monitoring what information was reaching the police. She had been managing the story from the very first moment, and when she realized she couldn't control it from inside the hospital, she had picked up my phone and walked out. My phone finally unlocked through a factory reset on the 4th evening, which meant losing everything on it but also meant having a working number again. Messages flooded in, friends who hadn't heard from me, a coworker asking about a meeting, 2 neighbors wondering if I was okay. I sat with the phone and read through them slowly, each one a small reminder that people outside my family had noticed I was gone. Then the phone rang. Brittany. I stared at her name on the screen for 3 full seconds. Then I answered. Where are you? I asked. She sounded sharp and impatient, the exact tone she used when she felt like someone was being unreasonable. Lauren, don't start, she said. You are going to ruin everything. I let that land. I was alone, I said, my voice very quiet. I was scared and I couldn't reach anyone. She exhaled hard. I couldn't stay there. You don't understand what you're doing to me right now. To her. What I'm doing to you, I repeated. Lauren, just keep your mouth shut for 5 more days, she said, her voice dropping. That's all I'm asking. 5 days. Then she hung up. I sat with the phone in my hands and thought about those words. 5 days. Until what? The answer arrived the next morning in a group text my aunt sent to the whole family, a cheerful string of messages and a photograph of a decorated venue. So excited for Brittany and Patrick's engagement party Friday. Can't wait to celebrate. I read it twice. Then I looked up at the ceiling and let the pieces arrange themselves clearly for the first time. Friday was 5 days from the accident. Brittany wasn't hiding because she was overwhelmed. She wasn't avoiding the hospital because she couldn't handle seeing me hurt. She was hiding because she needed 5 clean days, 5 days to shape what people knew and believed before they all gathered in one room. She needed to walk into that engagement party with her story already set. She needed to be the devoted sister who had handled the crisis quietly and efficiently, not the one who had abandoned me unconscious and then lied to our parents about where I was. The engagement party wasn't why she left me. But it was exactly why she stayed gone. And when I understood that, something that had still been soft in me, some last corner that kept saying maybe she panicked, maybe she was scared, went quiet and still and hard. My parents were sitting beside my bed that same afternoon, speaking in low voices about what to do. My mother said they should wait until after the party. My father said that was insane. My mother said confronting Brittany now would send her into a spiral. My father said she was already in one. I lay there listening to them negotiate around their other daughter's feelings while I was right there in the bed. I had been listening to that negotiation my whole life, the careful, endless management of Brittany's reactions, every family decision filtered through how she might respond. And I was tired. Tired in a way that had become physical, heavier than my actual injuries. "Stop," I said. Quietly, but both of them went still. I looked at them, really looked, the way I hadn't allowed myself to in years because seeing painful things clearly means acknowledging them. "If you protect her again," I said, my voice shaking but steady, "you are choosing her over me. The same way you have always chosen her over me. And I need you to understand that I see it. I have always seen it." My mother started crying. My father stared at the floor. But neither of them told me I was wrong. Carol found me later that evening and asked me to step into the small family room down the hall. She was holding a folder, and her expression was serious but not unkind. She sat across from me and set the folder on the table between us. "These are internal documents," she said carefully. "I want you to understand that they exist and that they are accurate. What you do with that knowledge is your decision." I opened the folder. Inside was a printed copy of the visitor log from the night of my admission, a copy of the incident notes made by the intake staff, and a typed record of the attempts made to contact my family. The log showed Brittany's arrival time and her departure time, 23 minutes after I was brought in. The incident notes included the phrase "patient appears to have been left without a designated emergency contact or family representative." The contact record showed 4 unanswered calls to my parents' numbers, placed by the hospital over the first 2 days. Carol watched me read through it all. When I looked up, she said, "You don't need to beg anyone to believe you. Not with this." I nodded. And for the first time since Tuesday, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt prepared. Brittany arrived on the 5th day. I heard her before I saw her. The quick click of heels in the hallway, a gasp that was just a fraction too theatrical, and then she was in the doorway. Hair curled. Makeup perfect. Eyes already glistening with tears that hadn't quite fallen. "Oh my God," she breathed, pressing one hand to her mouth. "Lauren, sweetheart," my mother stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Where have you been?" Her voice was not gentle. Brittany's eyes swept the room, me, my parents, Carol in the doorway. Doing what I'd watched her do my whole life, calculating the distance between where she stood and where she needed to be. Then she smiled sadly. "I've been handling everything," she said, her voice full of quiet suffering. "I didn't want to burden Lauren while she was still recovering." She reached for my hand. I looked at her fingers on mine. I thought about the phone in the parking lot. The changed passcode. The folder in my nightstand. "Hi, Brittany," I said. "Nothing else." And her smile flickered, just slightly, the way a light flickers when the connection isn't as solid as it looks from the outside. Brittany settled into the chair beside my bed and turned to our parents with the soft, slightly wounded expression she used when redirecting a room. "Lauren gets confused with the pain medication," she said gently. "She told the nurses I left her. I think she just doesn't fully remember those first hours." My father's eyes narrowed. "Did you change her phone passcode?" he asked. Brittany blinked. One blink too slow, too careful, and we all saw it. "What? No. Why would I?" "She found her phone in the parking lot," my mother said. "With a different code on it." Brittany shook her head with a small, bewildered look. "That doesn't make any sense." Then she shifted back into soft concern. "I was dealing with the police. It was incredibly traumatic for me too. I don't think anyone was thinking clearly in those first hours." I watched her perform. I had been watching her perform my entire life, but I had never been able to see it as clearly as I could right now. Maybe because I was finally still enough to look. Carol stood in the doorway with her arms folded, and she was not nodding along. She was watching Brittany the way a person watches something they have already assessed, not uncertain, not impressed, simply waiting. Carol stepped fully into the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform or posture. She just walked in and said, in her clear, steady way, "That's not accurate." Brittany's head turned toward her slowly. "I'm sorry?" Carol's hands were relaxed at her sides. "You refused to sign the consent forms," she said. "You left this hospital 23 minutes after the patient arrived without designating an emergency contact or leaving a number for staff to reach. You did not respond to 4 calls made by the hospital team over the following 2 days. That is all documented." The room was completely still. Brittany stared at her. "You can't talk to me like it happened," Carol said simply. "I'm not characterizing it. I'm describing it." Brittany's face went through 3 different expressions in about 2 seconds, shock, anger, and then something colder and more calculating underneath both of them. She turned to look at me, and for just a half second, the mask came fully off. What I saw in her face then was not embarrassment or guilt or fear. It was fury. Fury that I had someone on my side. Fury that I had not stayed small and silent and easy to manage the way I had always been before. She recovered fast. But I had seen it. A police officer arrived that afternoon to follow up on the accident report. He was polite and professional. Brittany was still in the room, she hadn't left, which I realized was because she thought she could manage whatever came next. The officer looked at his notes, then at Brittany. "We need to clarify your original statement," he said. "You indicated you were asleep when the accident occurred." Brittany smiled. "That's right." He looked back at his notes. The driver's statement, given in the ambulance, indicated the passenger was shouting directions immediately before impact. My father made a sharp sound. She also stated the passenger grabbed her arm, the officer continued. The room went quiet. My mother whispered, "Brittany." Brittany's jaw worked. Her eyes swept the room once, fast, searching for a way through. She found none. "I didn't mean," she started. "I wasn't trying to," then she stopped herself. The stopping was its own admission. My father looked at her like he was seeing her clearly for the first time in years. My mother, beside me, took my hand in both of hers. This time she didn't let go. And the officer wrote in his notebook, and the room was completely still, and no one rushed to fill the silence on Brittany's behalf. Brittany's phone buzzed on the chair beside her. She grabbed it and looked at the screen, and the expression that crossed her face told me everything, tight, anxious, the look of a person watching something they built start to shake. My aunt. The engagement party. Everyone already gathered and waiting. My father said, in a voice I had never heard from him before, flat and cold and absolutely certain, "That's why you disappeared." Brittany's chin snapped up. "I did not disappear. You left your sister alone in a hospital bed," my father said, "lied to her parents, changed her phone so she couldn't call anyone, left the accident scene before the police could take your full statement, and then showed up here today looking like you'd just come from a salon." He paused. "Because you had a party to get to." Brittany's voice cracked. "You always act like everything I do is wrong," she said. "Like Lauren is perfect and I'm the problem." My mother said softly, "Lauren didn't leave anyone in a hospital." That quiet sentence, spoken by our mother who had spent 20 years finding middle ground between us, landed harder than anything shouted. Brittany went silent. And the room, for once, did not rush to fill the silence for her. The officer asked one final question, his voice measured and careful. "Did you direct the driver to make a turn she indicated was unsafe?" Brittany shook her head sharply. "No. Absolutely not." Then she looked at my parents, at my father's face, at my mother's eyes, and something broke open in her, the way things break when held too tightly for too long. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she burst out. She never listens. She acts like helping me is some huge burden she has to carry. I just wanted her to take the turn. I didn't think, she stopped. The room was silent. The officer wrote in his notebook. My father closed his eyes briefly. My mother made a small quiet sound. Because Brittany had just said, without realizing it, exactly what she had been avoiding for 5 days. She had directed me. She had grabbed my arm. She had not been asleep. Every person in that room had now heard it in her own words, without anyone pulling it from her. I did not feel triumph. I felt something quieter and more permanent, the specific relief of being believed without having to beg for it. After the officer left, my father stood and faced Brittany. His voice was shaking but his eyes were steady. You left her, he said. You lied to us. You changed her phone. You let us believe she was fine for 5 days while she was here alone. Brittany's eyes were wet. I panicked, she said. You don't know what it's like to, we were scared too, my mother said quietly. Her voice was different now, stripped of the careful management she usually kept around it. We've been scared every time you needed us, and we came running. But we came. We didn't disappear. Brittany's voice cracked. Because you always fix things for me. You always rescue me. My mother looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded once, like something had finally been said aloud that needed saying. Yes, she said. We did. She turned to look at me. Her attention stayed on me, didn't split toward Brittany, didn't drift to manage the room. I am so sorry, she said. I am so deeply sorry. My father swallowed hard. We are done, he told Brittany, protecting you from what you do. Brittany's eyes went wide. Because losing their protection was the consequence she had never once believed would actually come. Weeks later, I moved into a small apartment near my physical therapy center. My parents helped with the deposit, clearly trying to overcompensate, constant check-ins, too many groceries, apologies folded inside every visit. I accepted the help. But I didn't let guilt rebuild the old structure. I told them I needed them to stop managing Brittany's image in my presence. That I wouldn't perform forgiveness I hadn't arrived at yet. They listened, imperfectly, awkwardly, but genuinely. Patrick postponed the engagement after the full story reached him. My parents stopped making Brittany's financial choices invisible. Family members who had always accepted her version of events began, slowly, asking different questions. The consequences weren't dramatic. They were real and lasting, which is worse for someone like Brittany than anything loud. And me? I started physical therapy. I talked honestly to a counselor about a childhood spent invisible. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I walked into my 3rd rehab session and told my therapist, without shaking, without checking if it was okay, that I was ready to build my life forward. Brittany left me alone in a hospital to protect her image. 5 days later, the truth stood without me carrying it. And I never had to beg anyone to see it again.